Number 10. Man kills wife for cheating. So what would you do if you caught your partner cheating on you? Break up with them or file for divorce? No matter what you do, your plans for revenge probably won't be as extreme as this. A 48-year-old man from Texas shot his wife after he allegedly found out she was cheating on him. The man later uploaded a 4-minute video on YouTube to apologize to his children. He was quickly apprehended by police. In the video, he blamed his dead wife and said that the 18-year age difference was terrible for them and that he always knew something was wrong. The man also complains about petty issues like messy hair. In his so-called confessional recording, he is seen telling his children that he warned their mother to not play with his emotions. He also added that he has an audio of his wife talking to another man. According to the woman's mom, who was there when the incident occurred, the man was hiding in the bathroom with a gun. He had threatened to kill both of them. She ran out of the house, but couldn't save her daughter. Number 9. Splitting up. We all want some sweet, tender love and care when we're sick. But what happens when you're not getting that TLC from your spouse when you need it most? A couple in a Cambodian village had the weirdest solution after a marriage of 40 years. The husband chose to end the marriage, all because his wife didn't take care of him when he was sick. There were no courts involved in the divorce. Instead, the village's head governed the split. But it's not the reason for the split or how the marriage ended that got this couple a spot on our list. It's what happened after. The couple only had a house to their name. So the question was, how would they split that? The husband and his friends came up with a quick solution to split the house. Literally. They could have put up a wall and divided the space, but no. Sawing the place in half seemed like a better idea. The man moved his side of the house onto his parents' property, leaving his wife's half on the original site. The house wasn't made of concrete, which is why he could pull this stunt off. But that does not mean it was easy. Talk about splitting up. Number 8. Pay for your spouse's ice cream. Ice cream, ice cream. We all scream for ice cream. When you file for a divorce, you have to give the court a convincing reason to end your marriage. This is when things can take a very sour turn. What usually ensues are blame games and a lot of couples therapy. The proceedings also uncover some cycles of petty disputes. There are only a handful of divorce cases that have been amicable. But when it comes to wacky reasons for divorce, this man from India takes the cake. Or should we say he simply takes the ice cream. In 2013, an Indian man filed for divorce after 23 years of marriage, stating that his wife blew his money on, any guesses? Well, apparently she blew it all on ice cream. Yeah, ice cream. What kind of ice creams were these really? How much exactly? We don't have all the answers. But since that's the reason for divorce, it must have amounted to something big, right? After all the drama, the wife just had one thing to say. The husband was a multi-millionaire. But just because your significant other can afford the delicious frozen treat, doesn't mean you should blow all his money on it. The confused court eventually granted them a divorce. But there was a catch. In her petition, the wife asked for a monthly spousal support amount, a 2-bedroom home that they jointly owned, and child support. The court agreed to an interim allowance, but also threw in a bit of a treat. The judge sure had a sense of humor, because he asked the husband to pay his ex-wife an extra alimony of $150 per month to buy ice cream. Wow, now that's some settlement, right? Number 7. Settling scores. Sometimes people just fall out of love. Couples therapy can help, or you call it quits. But this woman had a different set of problems to worry about. Falling out of love was the least of her worries. This woman's husband had hid a secret from her throughout their entire marriage. Turns out he had been keeping a secret diary of all the things that his wife was doing wrong. Could you imagine that? A journal of your mistakes? That is taking pettiness to another level. Maybe it could be justified if the husband was a shining example of himself. But he wasn't. Not only had he cheated on her, he even confessed that he didn't marry her for love. Of all the reasons a person can marry someone, this has to be the most disappointing one. So here's what he said. He married because he wanted help with the rent. They went to therapy to sort out the differences. The therapist told her to end the marriage and get as far away from him as possible. Can you think of any other weird reasons couples chose to split up? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 6. Forced to dig up ashes. When marriages end, it can get really messy. Between court battles, child custody, and splitting of assets, it's chaotic for couples. But this man from Australia probably had it worse than most. A couple from South Wales, Mr. and Mrs. Moss, both wanted sole ownership of the farm they were living on. The man held a stable job as a manager and made a decent living, but his aim was to turn the farm into his main source of income, so he was very disappointed when the court gave the verdict in his wife's favor. But that's not the worst of it all. It wasn't just a piece of land for the ex-husband. It held a very close and sentimental value to him. He had built a memorial garden on the farm for his parents that had passed away. He buried their urns next to one another, complete with headstones. The garden also had a golden bust of his father. It's not an unissued thing to bury dear loved ones within the boundaries of an ancestral property. The court ordered him to dig up the ashes and remove the headstones and the bust, since the ownership was going to his ex-wife now. But why did the court ask him to dig up the ashes? The judge said he reached his decision based on the fact the headstones above the urns aren't permanently fixed, and he gave Mr. Moss 2 weeks to dig up the site and remove the jars of ashes, as well as the bust of his father. Mr. Moss was heartbroken, saying, "It's not just a block of land or a piece of dirt. It was my parents' home." But since the ashes and headstones fall under the category of movable assets, he was asked to remove them. And the fact that the urns could be moved was actually a significant reason why the court ruled in his wife's favor. Now that's messed up. Number 5. Vomiting on her wedding dress. Bad marriages aren't just a thing of the modern world. When you force 2 incompatible people together, a disaster is bound to happen. We have a page from history to prove that. Princess of Wales, Augusta, didn't just have one of the worst marriages in history, but also one of the most disastrous wedding ceremonies ever. The German princess was sent to Britain at 16 years old as a bride in the arranged royal wedding to the Prince of Wales. The royal family was in such a rush to get the wedding started that they put her in a wedding dress and began the ceremony as soon as Augusta arrived. This was back in the 16th century, so you can imagine how long the journey might have been for her. And the tight corsets and heavy layers of clothing don't exactly sound like the most welcoming thing, especially when you're so tired. As the ceremony began, the princess grew extremely nervous and ended up puking on her gown. That's not the worst part. As her mother-in-law extended her hand to help Augusta, she threw up on her as well. The wedding was just the tip of the iceberg. Augusta's married life was equally bad, with her husband repeatedly cheating on her. He died before he ever got the chance to sit on the throne, and Augusta never became a queen. History, my friends, rarely has a happy ending. Number 4. Weirdest album deal ever. Marrying your boss's sister is never a good idea, but Marvin Gaye was too in love to realize that. The famous singer only had a few hits to his name when he married Anna Gordy in 1964. Anna's brother Barry was the head of Motown Records, which also happened to be the most prominent black music corporation globally. After 12 long years of marriage, Anna filed for a divorce. By then, Marvin was already an international sensation, but other than the massive fan following, he also had a huge drug problem and 2 children from another woman. So the divorce was a no-brainer for Anna. She demanded $1 million, which doesn't sound like a big deal for an artist of Marvin's stature, but it was. Marvin had a cocaine addiction that drained him of most of his money, so he didn't have any for Anna. His lawyer came up with the idea of offering Anna the $305,000 advance made by Motown towards Marvin's next album, plus the first $295,000 it would fetch in sales. Anna took the deal. Since the profits were going to Anna, Marvin didn't intend on making the album a hit. Instead, he used the opportunity to punish Anna with the lyrics. The album became a journal of how the marriage broke. Number 3. Living with the ex. We've all seen public divorces of celebrities and billionaires and their split of assets. Who gets to keep the mansion in Malibu? Who gets the more significant share in the multi-million-dollar business? But most couples don't have those luxuries. What happens when you don't have the assets to split? What happens when both parties are in a desperate need? Something like this happened to a couple in Spain, and the judge had a creative solution, to say the least. The couple had been feuding over the ownership of their house for quite some time when the judge offered a novel solution. She asked the couple to split the 820 square foot house themselves. With no other option in sight, the couple accepted the compromise. Living with your ex might seem like the worst thing ever, but it is still better than facing financial woes. According to the split, the wife will live upstairs with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and her husband will have a downstairs unit with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The divorced couple also feels that it will be better for the children, except for the terrifying awkwardness that might come with living together. The solution doesn't sound so bad, does it? Number 2. Do the dishes. A marriage is a 50-50 job. You can't expect your partner to do everything for you. But we guess this couple didn't get the memo. They had been married for 5 years, and the woman spent a large part of her day cleaning the house. We all know that keeping a house spick and span is a back-breaking task. The only expectation she had from her partner was that he washed the dishes. No big deal, right? After she had finished her cleaning spree, she came to the kitchen to see that the sink was still full of dishes, and the husband hadn't even touched it. That's when she knew it was time to end the marriage. But wait, was not doing the dishes a viable cause for divorce? Turns out the couple had been facing issues for a long time. The pile of dishes wasn't the only problem. They had a whole heaping pile of feuds. But the dishes sure were the last straw. Next time if things are turning topsy-turvy in your marriage, just be sure the dishes are done. And number 1, YouTube video. Sometimes couples just need that last nudge to realize that they are not the right ones for each other. For this woman, the sign came in the form of a YouTube video. One night, the couple were sitting on the couch watching TV, and she asked her husband to play a YouTube video while his movie was on commercial. He flat out refused and didn't even bother giving her a reason. That was the moment she realized that she couldn't stay in the marriage. Separation based on this incident alone might seem excessive, but it made her realize that she couldn't stay with someone who didn't respect her enough to do something so easy. Sometimes it's the little things that sink the ship. In this case, the remote did hold the key for a lot more than what it is meant to. Number 8. Crystal Brooke Howell. It's natural for teens to rebel against their parents' rules, but most adolescents would never dream of killing their mother and father just so they can have their way. However, 17-year-old Crystal Brooke Howell wasn't like most kids. It all started in 2014 when the teen's father, Michael Howell, caught her using a 5-finger discount, aka shoplifting, while they were out shopping together. Investigators believe that this was when the teen began hatching a plot to make her dad disappear. Not long after the incident, Crystal killed her dad while he slept on the sofa. People soon noticed that Crystal was driving around in Michael's Range Rover, and rumors swirled about her throwing drug-fueled parties at his house. She even moved some of her friends in and installed a stripper pole. Crystal told her friends that her father had abandoned her while claiming to others that he had committed suicide in another state. The truth finally came to light a month after Michael disappeared, when Crystal went to visit her mother in Georgia. She allowed her pals to stay at the property when they found a plastic container with a sleeping bag draped over it. The tote contained Michael's corpse, and it was clear that someone had shot him in the face. The authorities caught up with Crystal at a Motel 6 and charged her with first-degree murder. Her lawyer claimed that she had mental health issues, but the prosecutor argued that Crystal's ability to plan and conceal the murder proved that she was sound enough mind to be held criminally responsible for her actions. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison. Number 7. Sierra Halseth. When two teenagers think they're in love, it's hard for anyone to convince them otherwise, including their own parents. This was certainly the case for 16-year-old Sierra Halseth and her 18-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero. Sierra's father, Daniel, forbade the couple from seeing each other, but they were determined to be together at any cost. The young pair decided that killing Daniel was the only way to make the relationship work, so they made a plan and put it into action. When someone found Daniel's stabbed and dismembered body in April of this year, family members had trouble reaching Sierra. In addition to murdering him, someone had also tried to burn his house down. But Sierra couldn't seem to care less, and it didn't take long for her and Aaron to become the prime suspects in the case. In the days leading up to the crime, surveillance footage captured the pair buying bleach, lighter fluid, gloves, and a circular saw. The couple had also posted videos of themselves on social media immediately after the killing, bragging about how they had murdered and tried to dismember Daniel and saying that it was worth it. They also boasted about having lots of sex right after committing the murder, making it clear that they felt no remorse for their horrific behavior. Sierra and Aaron had fled the area in Daniel's car and were on the run in Salt Lake City, Utah, when the authorities caught up with them. The young lover's vision of a picture-perfect escape didn't last very long, and the consequences for it could be lifelong. Sierra was charged with murder and is being tried as an adult. She was spared from the death penalty, but could still spend life in prison. Aaron, on the other hand, was an adult when the murder happened and could face the death penalty. Number 6. Sarah Johnson. According to a 2019 study, parricide, the act of killing a parent or close relative, is the rarest type of murder. And when it does happen, it's usually carried out by an adult middle-class white male with no criminal record. So it's extremely rare for a woman to commit this type of crime. But it does happen. In 2003, married couple Diane and Alan Scott Johnson were murdered in their home in Bellevue, Idaho. Their 16-year-old daughter, Sarah, appeared at a neighbor's house, claiming that her parents had been shot by an intruder. She told investigators that she was awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of gunfire, but they didn't buy the teen's story, especially since she had obvious motive for wanting her mom and dad dead. Just days earlier, the couple had banned the teen from seeing her 19-year-old boyfriend due to his alleged drug trafficking connections. But this didn't stop the infatuated ingenue, who was determined to continue their relationship. Instead of respecting her parents' rules, Sarah fired a bullet into her mother's head while she slept. She then went into the bathroom, where her father was showering, and shot him in the chest. Forensic evidence connected the angry adolescent to the crime, and she was arrested for murder. In 2005, a jury found Sarah guilty of killing her parents in cold blood. She received 2 life sentences, but still maintains her innocence to this day. Sarah's lawyer tried and failed to get her a new trial in 2012, claiming that her previous attorney represented her poorly. When that didn't work, Sarah tried to get her sentence reduced, but the court upheld her punishment. Number 5. Stacy Lannert. Taking a life is never okay, but some cases make more sense than others. Take, for instance, Stacy Lannert, whose alcoholic father began sexually abusing her when she was 8 years old. As his drinking problem worsened, so did the abuse. Stacy's parents had divorced when she was young. She tried telling her mother and her babysitter about what was happening to her, but failed to convey the gravity of the situation to them. Plus, her father had threatened to hurt her if she didn't stay quiet. He often became violent when he was drunk, and she was scared. In the meantime, Stacy's father also started hurting her young sister, Christy. When Stacy was 18, she moved to Guam to live with her mother, while Christy stayed behind at her father's house in Missouri. She tried convincing her dad to let Christy move to Guam, but he said no. In 1990, Stacy approached her father while he was passed out drunk and shot him point blank in the head. She confessed to the killing, saying that she hated her dad and that he needed to die, and she was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The judge recommended Stacy's case for clemency, but the paperwork sat, collecting dust, for 18 years while she languished behind bars. Finally, in 2009, State Governor Matt Blunt commuted her sentence and ordered for her to be freed immediately. Stacy never denied murdering her father. Many feel that she committed the crime under extenuating circumstances, that she didn't kill in cold blood, but was triggered by years of abuse. On the other hand, prosecutor Bob McCullough remained convinced that Stacy's father never harmed her and that she killed him for an inheritance. But her story was compelling enough to get her released from prison, where she had established a reputation for being a model inmate. Throughout her incarceration, Stacy made it a point to remain active in the community. She trained handicapped service dogs, helped troubled teens turn their lives around, and acted as an advocate for other survivors of abuse. In addition to garnering sympathy for her suffering, her service spoke to her character, and she continues her activism on the outside. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think it's fair Stacy spent almost 20 years behind bars? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 4. ERIK and LYLE Menendez. From the outside looking in, ERIK and LYLE Menendez grew up in a privileged world, thanks to their father, Jose's, high-paying career as a corporate executive in Beverly Hills. They certainly never wanted or needed for anything in a material sense, but things weren't as picture-perfect as they seemed. At least not if you believe the narrative put forth by the brothers. Their childhoods were allegedly fraught with sexual, emotional, and physical abuse at the hands of their own parents. One day in 1989, ERIK and LYLE threatened to expose Jose for the lifetime of suffering he put them through. He reportedly responded by threatening to murder his sons. They were scared, so they went into the family's den with shotguns and killed their parents. Then, the brothers left the house and went to the movie theater to secure their alibi. When they returned home later, they dialed 911. They managed to avoid an initial suspicion about their possible involvement in their parents' murders. But the pair soon began spending lavishly. They bought Rolexes, high-end cars, new townhouses, expensive tennis lessons, and even a restaurant, blowing through an estimated $700,000 within months of their mother and father's tragic deaths. In the meantime, police investigated other leads, but none of them panned out. Detectives noticed ERIK and LYLE's wanton spending and began to zero in on them as the prime suspects. ERIK eventually confessed to the murder to his therapist, Jerome Oziel, and Oziel told his mistress about the brothers' crime. When the clandestine couple broke up, she went to the police and blew the case wide open. The Menendez brothers were arrested and tried separately, resulting in 2 mistrials. They were then tried together, and the jury found them both guilty. LYLE and ERIK both received life sentences and are serving their time together at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility outside San Diego. Number 3. Kyle Kirk. Just a few months ago, concerned residents in Rome, New York, called the police after seeing 30-year-old Kyle Kirk standing outside his home, covered in blood. Officers found Kyle's 60-year-old father, Howard, dead in the driveway. Inside, they found the body of his mother, 53-year-old Amanda Osborne. Both victims had been stabbed to death, and all signs pointed towards Kyle being the killer. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and taken to jail. Kyle pleaded not guilty at his arraignment, and his public defender requested a mental health evaluation to determine whether the suspect understands the charges against him and is capable of assisting in his defense. The attorney had apparently tried to talk to Kyle and had gotten nowhere, and he thought that maybe a professional would do a better job at probing his client's mind. When the judge asked Kyle if he understood why he was in court, he replied, "No, I don't." Needless to say, the judge approved the request for the mental health evaluation. Kyle began refusing to go to court and reportedly spat on officers when they tried getting him to leave the jail. He was found not competent to stand trial and was transferred to a mental health facility where the goal is to get him to a point where he is competent to stand trial. Neighbors told reporters from the Rome Sentinel that Kyle moved in with his parents several months before the murders. Nobody seems to know much about the circumstances surrounding the brutal killings, including New York State troopers, who said that their investigation is ongoing. Number 2. Ronald DeFeo Jr. You've probably read, seen, or at least heard of the Amityville horror tale. But did you know that it was inspired by actual people and events? In 1974, a 23-year-old Amityville, Long Island resident named Ronald DeFeo Jr. walked into a local bar and announced that he needed help because someone had shot his parents. A group of concerned patrons accompanied DeFeo to his family's home, where they found his mother and father dead. Little did they realize, this was just the beginning of a disturbing and sinister tale that was about to unravel, and that would shake the community to its core. Suffolk County Police reported to the scene, where they found 6 of DeFeo's family members dead in their beds. In addition to his parents, all 4 of Ronald's younger siblings, who ranged in age from 9 to 18 years old, had been shot dead. Evidence indicated that Ronald's mother, 43-year-old Louise, and his 13-year-old sister, Allison, were awake when they were murdered. It didn't take long for investigators to identify inconsistencies in his story. Ronald confessed to the brutal killings the following day, telling detectives, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop." He tried for an insanity plea in court, but was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder. A judge sentenced Ronald to 25 years to life, and all his attempts to gain parole were denied. He died in prison last year at the age of 69. And number 1, Charles Whitman. During the 1960s, Charles Whitman earned a reputation as a model U.S. Marine, but he had a dark side, and although it went largely unnoticed when it was too late, the signs were there. Whitman had a gambling problem, and he had gotten in trouble for threatening a fellow soldier over a $30 loan. He also resented the Marine Corps, but he did a good job of hiding it to receive an honorable discharge. Over the following years, Whitman worked various ordinary jobs, including as a bill collector and a bank teller. In the meantime, he got pulled into the middle of his parents' marital problems. As he grew more and more stressed, Whitman began experiencing debilitating headaches and abusing amphetamines. And at some point, the demons inside his mind took over. In 1966, 2 years after he left the military, the troubled ex-Marine typed a suicide letter describing his unusual and irrational thoughts. He wrote that he had decided to kill his wife and mother, but that he didn't know why. Believing that his mental issues and headaches were biological, he requested for an autopsy to be performed after his death. The next day, Whitman drove to his mother's apartment in Austin, Texas, and stabbed her to death. He then laid her body in her bed and covered it with sheets. After that, he stabbed his wife to death. Then, he drove to the University of Texas campus in Austin and gained entry by pretending to be a researcher. Whitman opened fire from the observation deck of a clock tower, killing 14 people and injuring 31 others. After senselessly spraying bullets at innocent victims for over an hour and a half, he was shot to death by police. Experts determined that while it was clear Whitman had mental issues, they don't know exactly what influenced him to murder his wife and mother and commit the massacre at UT.
Number 10. Forced consumption. Timothy Piazza just wanted to be part of a brotherhood. At least that's what the Penn State fraternity pledge's girlfriend has said. She recently spoke out about the terrifying death of her boyfriend Timothy, who was killed during hazing at the Beta Theta Pi campus frat house. Timothy drank so much alcohol that he got blackout drunk. The alcohol was basically forced upon him, with his fraternity brothers pushing him to drink more and more. They got Timothy so wasted that he fell down a set of stairs and hit his head on the bottom. But by the time his supposed brothers called the ambulance several hours after the incident, it was too late. Timothy was already dead. The tragedy came as a huge surprise to Timothy's friends and family. The first surprise was that Timothy joined a fraternity at all. He was never into the party scene. He very rarely touched alcohol in high school, and he never expressed any desire to be in the whole frat house scene. He has been described by those who knew him as a truly good person. In fact, both his girlfriend and his father say that had the roles been reversed and it was a different pledge who had gotten injured, Timothy would have picked the person up and taken them to the hospital himself. But that's not how things turned out. The frat brothers intentionally gave Timothy a lethal dose of alcohol and then let him lie on the bottom of the stairs for 12 hours before they called an ambulance. Timothy's family is now trying to bring up charges against the boys who let their son die. If they had taken him to an ambulance hours earlier when the accident first happened, Timothy would probably still be alive. Number 9. Unscheduled train. Mortimer Leggett may have been the very first fraternity initiation death, but they started to happen quite frequently after that. In 1905, the freshman Stuart Lathrop Pearson also perished in a violent fraternity initiation ceremony. It happened at about 9:40 p.m. on October 28th. Stuart was a pledge with Delta Kappa Epsilon at the Kenyon College. His fraternity brothers directed him to a railroad bridge and told him to stay there until they went back for him. However, there are a few different versions of the story. One of them suggests that his fraternity brothers bound him to the tracks and blindfolded him. Either way, the end result was the same. An unscheduled train came roaring down along the Kokosing River. Little Stuart Pearson either didn't see the train coming, didn't react quickly enough, or simply couldn't get out of the way because he was tied up. He got ran over and died instantly from the brute force of the train plowing through his squishy human body. When asked why Stuart was left on the train tracks, the fraternity members claimed it was supposed to be a quiet time of reflection for Stuart to contemplate his potential membership. The train was supposedly unscheduled. Nobody had known that the train was coming, or else the fraternity members probably wouldn't have accidentally killed their pledge. Since 1905, the area around Kenyon College has changed quite a bit. The old railroad bridge has been turned into a bike trail. Some people say they still see the ghost of Stuart Pearson loitering around it, trying to complete his initiation ceremony. Number 8. Internally bleeding. Michael Davis died from the injuries that he suffered during a savage fraternity hazing ritual over 25 years ago. The ritual went down at a Southeast Missouri State University. Michael Davis was trying to become a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. It was February 15, 1994. He went through the entire hazing ritual and came out the other side seemingly okay. But a day later, he collapsed dead and had to be taken to the hospital for an autopsy. Doctors found that he had a fractured rib, his lung was damaged, his liver was damaged, and his kidney was basically ruptured. He also had a bruised and bleeding heart and a spinal hemorrhage. Well, that's a lot of damage for one individual to take. But what's interesting about this case is that there were 4 other pledges being tortured at the same time. The hazing involved nothing more than physical beatings. They were slapped on the neck, kicked, hit, punched in the chest, and body slammed. And while the other 4 walked away with all their organs intact, Michael Davis's body didn't prove quite as strong. His insides were all mixed up, causing him to die within 24 hours of internal injuries. Over a dozen men were prosecuted. The fraternity was banned, and Michael's mother earned $2.25 million as part of a lawsuit. How do you feel about hazing initiations that are literally just an excuse for fraternity members to beat up the pledges? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 7. Banned for 10 years. A national fraternity was banned from Pennsylvania for 10 years and ordered to pay a measly fine of $112,500. The reason goes back to 2013, to the death of Chun Michael Deng at BROOKE College in New York. The fraternity, Pi Delta Psi Inc., was found guilty on one felony count of involuntary manslaughter, as well as a few other charges, though they did get free of the murder charge. With this punishment, one of the first ever passed down to a fraternity, they are no longer allowed to do business in Pennsylvania. That also means that the fraternity can't operate any of its other chapters or colonies. Why did the fraternity get in so much trouble? Well, let's keep going through the list of people who got in trouble here. 4 individuals were sentenced on felony charges of voluntary manslaughter: Kenny Kwan, Raymond Lam, Charles Lai, and Sheldon Wong. Each of them got around 24 months in prison, along with 7 years of probation. The murder that started this whole business happened in December of 2013. The fraternity brothers were doing an outdoor ritual known as the glass ceiling. The ritual involved Michael Deng being blindfolded, while other fraternity members tackled him, issuing blunt force trauma to both his head and chest. According to the Pocono Mountain Police, the brutal game required the pledges to try and break through the line of fraternity members while being tackled. But Michael Deng never made it. He was tackled once too hard, his head hit the ground, he lost consciousness, and he never woke up. Number 6. Ritual kidnapping. On the morning of February 25, 2011, a Cornell sophomore named George DeDunes was found unresponsive and unconscious on a couch. He was dead just a few hours later. The police were able to do a quick investigation and determined that he died following a horrible fraternity hazing ritual. George, who was an aspiring doctor, was forced to drink too many shots of vodka. He was then subjected to reverse kidnapping. He was bound with zip ties. The fraternity brothers blindfolded him. They forced him to sing songs from the musical Rent, and he was quizzed on fraternity folklore. And all the while, he was continuously drinking vodka. At the time of his death, his blood alcohol content was 0.409, over 5 times the legal limit. 3 of the fraternity brothers who actually kidnapped George were charged with first-degree hazing, but they were acquitted of all criminal charges. In the end, nobody really got in any trouble for what happened, although Cornell came down pretty hard on hazing and basically abolished it. Number 5. A sudden collapse. A very long time ago, in 2001, a medical examiner ruled that Joseph T. Green Jr. died as a result of being hazed by fraternity brothers at Tennessee State University. Joseph was in the middle of jogging around a local high school track at around 6 in the morning when he collapsed suddenly. Before his collapse, he had been complaining about heart problems and breathing difficulties. The official cause of death was hypothermia induced by exercise and joined by an acute asthma attack. Joseph had been forced to perform extreme physical activities as part of his initiation into the fraternity Omega Psi Phi. This is one of the stranger fraternity initiation fails because Joseph wasn't beaten, he wasn't blindfolded, and he wasn't abusing alcohol. He was literally just exercising too hard. His fraternity brothers had asked him to do a bunch of physical activities, such as jogging around the track and performing calisthenics. If anything, it should have been good for the boy. But he probably wasn't used to exercising so much, and all the physical motion in the cool night air caused him to die. Number 4. Copious amounts of alcohol. The most recent fraternity fatality happened just a few months ago in 2021. 8 students have so far been indicted for the terrifying death of Stone Fultz at Bowling Green State University. On March 5th, 20-year-old Stone Fultz was hospitalized after consuming what his family lawyer described as a copious amount of alcohol. Jacob Kryn is being charged with first-degree involuntary manslaughter. 5 others are charged with third-degree involuntary manslaughter, and 2 other students are facing hazing charges. Plus, 4 out of 8 students have been charged with tampering evidence. Here's how it all went down. On the night of March 4th, the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity held their traditional Big Brother night. It's a pretty common event in fraternities across the country, involving the pledging process. Pledges are introduced to active members who are supposed to serve as their Big Brother through the night. But what it really means is that everyone gets extremely intoxicated. Stone Foltz and the other pledges were forced to drink hard liquor, about 40 shots each, as part of their initiation into the fraternity. Sometime in the night, Stone Foltz was dropped off at his apartment. His roommate found him unconscious on the floor sometime after that and called 911. Stone Foltz never did regain consciousness. He died from alcohol poisoning. His parents are now fighting desperately to end hazing nationwide. There is a dramatic reform happening at the moment, in which most scholastic institutes are adopting a zero-tolerance policy for hazing. But Stone's parents are now on a die-hard mission to make sure these policies are upheld. Number 3. Off the road. Victoria Tanya Ann Carter was killed in a devastating car crash on November 20th, 2010. She was one of 2 East Carolina University students who died in the car crash when the car they were in went off the road and plowed into a tree. The driver was Camille Shawnee Arrington from Nashville, Tennessee. She was charged with 2 counts of misdemeanor death by vehicle for being behind the wheel. All the girls in the vehicle that night were pledging to become members of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. The lawsuit filed by Victoria Carter's mother claims that the whole reason behind the accident had to do with a bad case of hazing. The lawsuit claims the sorority members were hazing the pledges in such a way that incidentally caused them to crash their car. One of the hazing activities included depriving the girls of sleep. Because of this, the girl behind the wheel was so exhausted from being abused by the sisters of the sorority she was trying to enter, she fell asleep while driving. She crashed the car on the way to a sorority appointment early in the morning. To make matters worse, the sorority tried to cover up what they had done by deleting emails and text message records, some of which included threats to pledges. The chapter of the sorority has been suspended until 2025. Even though this happened over 10 years ago, the lawsuit still hasn't been settled. Number 2. Head first into a brick wall. Speaking of a lawsuit, here's another lawsuit. Haley Ellen Hunt put together an enormous lawsuit against the Clemson University head coach, his 2 assistants, the school's athletic director, and at least 14 members of the team. The lawsuit, which was filed back in August of 2014, claims that on a night in 2011, Haley Hunt was hazed by the members of her team. Hazing has been a team tradition at Clemson University since the 1990s, but now it's become something of a problem. The ex-women's soccer player says she received a traumatic brain injury after she was blindfolded, thrown into the trunk of a car, and then forced to perform humiliating acts. When she was let out of the trunk, she couldn't see where she was running because of the blindfold. She ran away from the field and sprinted headfirst into a brick wall. The result of her head hitting that wall was brain trauma. She was forced to quit soccer in 2012 because a concussion specialist said that her brain just couldn't handle it. By 2016, Haley had settled a lawsuit with all except one of her defendants, though we don't know how much money was involved or what exactly the terms of the settlement ended up being. Number 1. The first fatality. Mortimer Dormer Leggett was born in 1821. That's such a long time ago that he was a general in the Union Army. But it was Mortimer's son in 1873 who became the first fatality that we know about from a hazing incident gone wrong. The boy had the same name as his father, Mortimer Leggett. He was going through initiation at Cornell University to enter a chapter of the Kappa Alpha Society in October. He was a young fella, not too large and maybe not too bright. He allowed his potential fraternity brothers to put a blindfold over his eyes and then coerce him across a railroad trestle with a group of other initiates. But as he was walking along the trestle, he fell and landed on the back of his head. The strike was so hard that Mortimer Leggett died, making him the first college fraternity death to happen during an initiation. It was quite sad for his father, who went on to live a pretty long life, even after his son died. What's the worst hazing ritual you've ever seen or been a part of? Let us know all about it in the comments, and thanks a lot for watching the video. Remember to hit that subscribe button and check out more awesome content from the channel. See you next time. Bye!